Coming up on Arirang News, as South Korea battles a third wave of COVID-19, the greater Seoul area is under new distancing rules. More facilities have to close and people are asked not to have parties for the year-end holidays. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is criticizing officials in charge of his regime's economy ahead of a new 5-year plan to be announced in January. It's a move seen as reinforcing party discipline amid serious economic problems. And consumer spending in South Korea declined in October for the first time in 3 months, despite social distancing being relaxed. There was an increase, though, in production in the services sector. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The greater Seoul area will be under some new restrictions starting Tuesday. It's not officially going to the next level of social distancing, but saunas and certain indoor sports facilities will have to close, and people are asked not to go to Christmas and New Year's parties. Kim Yeon-sung reports.
In response to South Korea's third wave of COVID-19 cases, Prime Minister Jong Un announced Sunday that stricter prevention measures will be taken in the capital region. For now, the Seoul area will keep its measures at level 2 officially. But from December 1st to the 7th, saunas and indoor sports facilities will have to close. Also, during that time, the government is shutting down amenities at apartment complexes, like cafes and study rooms, and is banning year-end parties at hotels and party rooms. Also, music academies and other facilities that teach wind instruments and singing will have to close, because mask wearing there is not feasible. The Prime Minister said, however, that all these measures will be useless unless the people themselves participate actively.
We need to start a season 2 of K-quarantine, led not by the government alone, but with the people taking part together. We need not just compliance, but each and every person to follow the day-to-day prevention measures.
The government has asked people in the capital region especially to cancel all end-of-the-year plans, especially if they involve 10 or more people. Outside the capital, the country will stay at level 1.5, but local administrations have the right to raise the level if they choose to. Kim Yeon-sung, Arirang News.
South Korea has seen fewer than 500 new cases of COVID-19 for a second day in a row, but this could be just because fewer people were tested over the weekend. Jang Tae-hyun has the latest.
South Korea reported 438 new cases of COVID-19 on Monday. Of those, 414 are local and 24 are from overseas. Almost 2/3 of cases in the country are from the capital region, with 158 in Seoul, 69 in Gyeonggi-do province, and 34 in Incheon. Those cases in Seoul include 11 at a table tennis room and 10 at a sports facility. Other cluster infections broke out at dance academies, churches, saunas, and other small gatherings. Outside the capital region, Busan had the highest number of cases with 52 on Monday, with many of those cases coming from cluster infections at a music academy. Other outbreaks across the country popped up at military bases and a kimchi-making event. As of Monday, the country has 76 severely ill patients. With 3 additional fatalities, the death toll is at 526. The country's total number of cases stands at 34,201. Jang Tae-hyun, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is criticizing officials in charge of the regime's economy ahead of a new 5-year plan to be set up in January. According to the North state-run media, he chaired a Politburo meeting on Sunday where he said the organs in charge of guiding the economy have failed to do so in a scientific manner. Analysts say Kim intended the criticism to reinforce party discipline ahead of the Workers' Party Congress in January, where the 5-year plan will be unveiled. The North has been struggling with economic problems caused by the pandemic and rising commodity prices. The former military dictator of South Korea, Chun has been given a suspended prison sentence of 8 months for libel in a case related to his memoirs about the 1980 Gwangju pro-democracy movement. Chun was convicted in the Gwangju District Court of defaming the late activist Catholic priest Jo Cheol-hyun, by calling him a liar regarding Jo's claims to have seen soldiers shooting at civilians from helicopters during the Gwangju protests. Chun, now 89 years old, was president from 1980 to 1988. According to official data, the military junta led by Chun killed more than 200 people in Gwangju and wounded 1,800 others. Statistics Korea today released a tranche of new data on the economy. The report shows consumers spent less in October than they did the month before, the first decline in 3 months. Consumption fell 0.9%, the decline led by food and beverages and home appliances. Overall industrial production across all sectors was the same as the month before. Production in the services sector rose 1.2% thanks to the easing of social distancing in October. Production in manufacturing declined by 1.3%. The pandemic has people in South Korea holding on to more cash and spending less of it. The Bank of Korea says the rate at which 50,000 won notes are circulating back to it fell to an all-time low in the first 10 months of this year. It says it got back only about a quarter of the notes it issued in that period. In past years, it's gotten back as much as 2/3 of them. The BOK said people are doing more of their shopping online rather than with cash, and they're also saving their cash because of economic uncertainty. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that, I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, thank you for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
Well, stocks in New York closed last Friday at an all-time high. The Dow above 30,000 now, the S&P and the Nasdaq also at new highs. What's the story in the global markets?
Okay, well, Dow has risen 12.9% so far this month. This is the best monthly performance since January of 1987. S&P 500 and Nasdaq rose 11.3% and 11.9%, respectively, in November. So this is their biggest monthly advance since April of this year. But the futures are down early over the weekend, though now it's somewhat settled. But the reasons that futures were down early over the weekend was that apparently the Trump administration is weighing blacklisting Chinese chipmaker SMIC as well as Chinese national offshore oil and gas producer CNOOC. Now, this move will limit their access to American investors and escalate tensions with China just before President-elect Joe Biden is scheduled to take over. So that market nervousness made itself felt during the beginning part of the weekend, but it seems to be settled down somewhat now, though we'll have to see on market opening how much that will have actually on the market. The European market, they're holding more or less stable, with DAX and CAC rising slightly over the last week, while FTSE fell slightly during the week. Asia, it's a bit mixed as usual. Nikkei and Hang Seng, they rose early in the week, but they fell on Friday. Shanghai, it's rising continually. Korea, Kospi had an interesting day today. It rose last week. In fact, until last week, Kospi was doing fairly well. It rose 16% during November, but it fell minus 1.6% today, mostly sell-off by foreign investors. They sold off about 2.4 trillion won worth of stocks. That's the largest sell-off since records began in 1999, but the drop was limited because individual investors bought the stocks sold by foreigners. Now, the market analysts are saying that it's probably profit-taking by foreigners. And Kosdaq, it rose last week. It rose today.
Right. Well, we have new data from Statistics Korea mentioned briefly before showing that consumption was down in October for the first time in 3 months. Investment was also down. Lots of data here. Tell us a bit more about that. What stands out to you, Professor?
Okay, well, it's giving very mixed signals. If you compare it to last month, production didn't rise at all. It was 0%, and this is attributed to fall in exports. So manufacturing was down minus 1.3% again compared to last month. And semiconductors were down 9.5% compared to last month, but it is up 13.1% compared to last year. Now, automobiles, again, no change compared to last month. minus 5.8% compared to last year. So production-wise, things are somewhat mixed. Services are up 1.2%, mostly restaurants, traveling, going to gyms because of the end of distancing. But because we are now increasing distancing again, whether production of services will go up in the next month or November is up to question. Consumption down 0.9% compared to the month before, that is September. But it's not all bad news. Consumer durables, mostly automobiles, it rose by 2.0% compared to September. And consumer semi-durables, which are clothing and shoes, they rose by 7.2%. What fell was consumer non-durables, such as food. And that is presumably because people are not staying at home. They're going out to eat, which also accounts for the increases in services that we mentioned earlier. The future business cycle indicator was up by 0.4 points. The current business cycle indicator was up by 0.5 points. So people seem to be optimistic, or at least they were optimistic at the end of last month, but investment is still bad. Business investment was down 3.3% in October compared to September, and construction was down 0.1% compared to September.
Well, now it's the start of a new week, of course, Professor. What's on your radar in the days ahead? Any data?
Okay, well, Wednesday, it's the Korean Consumer Price Index. Last month, the increase in Consumer Price Index inflation was only about 0.1%. So there were concerns not only about a recession, but a possible deflation. I think they were over-worried about going into deflation, but this month will show how much of a trend it will be. The international balance of payments is also due on Friday. The current account is probably positive because we had a merchandise trade surplus during October. And then for the export figures, U.S. wages and unemployment figures for France and Germany for November are out this week. The EU unemployment for October is also out this week, and Purchasing Managers Index, which is an early indicator of whether our economy is going to recession or going into recovery for U.S. and various European countries, are also due this week.
Got it. We'll check back in later in the week then. Professor, thanks so much for sharing your insights today.
Thank you.
E-commerce has, of course, witnessed unprecedented growth this year in the pandemic. Now the Korean e-commerce market is in for a shake-up, with Amazon about to come in. Park Se-young reports.
The world's largest e-commerce company, Amazon, has selected local firm 11th Street as its stepping stone into the South Korean market, in a move that has caught industry watchers off guard. Amazon is the #1 e-commerce retailer in the U.S. and 5 other countries, whereas 11th Street is ranked 4th in the domestic market. But the Korean market is full of potential. The domestic e-commerce market size grew from $34 billion in 2013 to over $100 billion in 2018. The market is expected to reach nearly $150 billion in 2020. And some forecasts say Korea will become the 3rd largest e-commerce market in the world next year, after China and the US.
This is surprising news. To Amazon, it would have been an attractive option to test market responses while minimizing risks.
Although this may not bring any immediate changes, the industry is watching closely because major local firms like Coupang have been benchmarking Amazon's business strategies.
This is probably not welcome news for market leaders like Naver and Coupang. Korean companies are expected to cooperate with each other and increase their combined size.
In fact, Korean retailers have already been signing some big deals to boost their competitive edge in the industry. Naver has signed with the country's top delivery company CJ Logistics to improve fulfillment capabilities, and GS Retail has merged with GS Home Shopping to grow into an integrated on- and offline commerce platform. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed people's shopping habits, resulting in increasing competition among e-commerce retailers, and Amazon's entry will only make the market more competitive. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Making history again, BTS have scored their 5th #1 album on the U.S. Billboard 200 chart with the band's latest release, B. The achievement means BTS are the first Korean artist to top the chart with 5 different albums. B was released on November 20th, and it earned 242,000 equivalent album units in the U.S. in the week ending November 26th. The last group to top the Billboard 200 with 5 consecutive albums was the Beatles. That brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.